What's up, bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another video. Today I want to go through probably my #1 hip mobility but also strengthening exercise, and that very simply is the seated good morning. This exercise is something that's been around for absolutely years. Olympic lifters, powerlifters, and even just your standard gym lifters have been using this exercise for a long time. This is just in before I get the comments like, "You're copying knees over toes, guys." Like, no. Anyway, today I wanted to make a quick and to the point video about how to apply and use this exercise, because I think it is invaluable for those of us who want to develop flexibility for squatting, for hamstring flexibility, and also the pancake. Just generally, if you want better hip range, this is going to tick a lot of boxes in one nice exercise. So I'm going to break this down into 3 parts. Number 1, we're going to go briefly over the benefits of doing these drills. Number 2, we're going to go over some form cues for it. And number 3, I'm going to take you through the progressions, regressions, how to kind of scale the exercise depending if you're really tight or if you're really flexible, or kind of what you want to get out of it. So number 1, some benefits of the seated good morning. You get the best of both worlds, very simply. You get to get stronger and you get to get more flexible at the same time. Who doesn't want that all in one exercise? It's actually more of a lower back strengthening exercise than anything. Unlike the standing variation, which is also a fantastic drill, when we perform this seated one, it's going to reduce a little bit of the activation that we're going to get in the hamstrings and the glutes, and it's going to focus it down onto the lower back, the spinal erectors. This isn't a bad thing, it's actually a great thing. Strong lower back is going to help you with pretty much all sporting endeavors that you're going to end up doing. It also strengthens in a range that we don't necessarily train particularly often. It's going to translate very well to that bottom of a squat or the starting of a deadlift position, but also, as I mentioned, the pancake. Because the way gravity is acting as a vector in this drill, the movement is going to get increasingly harder the more we flex at the hips, reaching kind of the hardest point when our torso is actually bound parallel with our legs, which is rare for a hip hinge movement that we train otherwise, such as a Romanian deadlift or the standing variation. It also allows us to focus very specifically on this hip hinging, which is a fundamental part of improving your overall hip flexibility. Being able to properly articulate the hips is going to dramatically improve your squat, your deadlift, but also your hamstring flexibility for if you're doing pike, pancake, and just generally moving better in the hips. Because we have the hamstrings in a bent position, we've got those bent knees, it's going to reduce the requirement of range of motion, but still allow us to get that full tilting of the pelvis. So again, a great bang for your buck when it comes to flexibility. So a couple of things to note with the form. This is kind of going to depend on the progression we're going to use, but for the basic progression, we're going to want to have ourselves sat on an object that is roughly or just underneath that knee height. So we're going to sit roughly at just below a parallel squat position. We want to have the feet at a comfortable width in which we can allow ourselves to fold forward. This is going to depend on the individual. Again, go with kind of your squatting width initially, maybe a little bit wider, but you can go wider, you can go narrower. It's going to depend somewhat on your hip anatomy and how that femur sits inside your hip capsule. I wouldn't actually say there's a right or wrong here. I would play around with wider and narrower and see what feels good for you. Finally, this is a hip hinge movement, so as much as possible, we want to try and maintain a nice lordotic neutral spine lifting position and focus on that movement happening in the hips. If we're going lighter in weight, higher in reps, I don't mind a little bit of lower back rounding that bottom position so we can try and inch out a little bit more range of motion, but on the most part, we want to focus on this movement coming from the rolling of the hips. Additionally, I'll add, if you're using a barbell for this particular exercise, I would recommend putting it into a low bar position and going wide, closer to the cuffs of the bar with the hands. This is going to set the bar at a more comfortable position for when we fold forward so that the bar doesn't roll up the back of your neck and you can hold it nice and stern in place. Right, so that is the basic. That's the why and the what. Let's talk about progressions and regressions. So as I said, this movement actually takes away a lot of the requirement for flexibility because we're going to be in that bent leg position. So hopefully, actually, we're going to be able to get a relatively reasonable range of motion out of this. The first thing I like to do with people is to get them lowering with their chest down towards a target. This could be a yoga block, a couple of yoga blocks, generally something that you're going to place on the bench in front of you that's going to be at a height that you can kind of touch that chest to, still maintaining roughly that lordotic, that neutral spine lifting position. The reason I like to use targets here is it just helps to reiterate where we're going to with that range of motion, and it also helps you to track progress because, you know, obviously lifting more weight is maybe useful in this position, but also if we're using this for gaining range of motion, then sometimes it's a little bit ambiguous in terms of how close or how far we're getting down into that. An object kind of takes out the guessing, and it's a nice focus point for you to think about when you're performing this exercise. The ultimate goal here would be to reduce that object height so we can get down to touching chest to bench or whatever the object is that we're sitting on. And this for me would be a really great range of motion, certainly more range of motion than you're probably going to need if we're going to be doing any sort of squatting or deadlifting. You're going to be covered. Let's say you want to take this a little bit further and you want to really squeeze out the flexibility gains that you can get from this exercise. Well, very simply, we can start in that same position. We can still focus on getting chest down to bench, but now we can start to extend the legs further from that standard sort of 90-degree bent position. The more we extend the legs, the more we demand additional range of motion when it comes to the hamstrings, as well as that anterior pelvic tilt. Just a little bit of additional extension in the knees can make this quite a bit harder. But again, it's very scalable. We can gradually move those feet further and further forward as we improve our range of motion. And then finally, we arrive at kind of what would be, for me, the end goal of this particular drill when it comes to building up range of motion. And that would be performing it with legs straight, but still on the bench. Now, I really like this as a progression towards that pancake, that end goal, because again, it's nice and scalable, but it's also a safe position to be in. And that feeling of safety is important when it comes to developing range of motion, because a lot of times the lack of range of motion is a protective mechanism by the body. So if we can implement in different aspects of our training that's gonna reinstate that safety, it's actually gonna help us develop more range of motion quicker. Because as well, we're training this with our hips in an elevated position, we're gonna be more advantageously using gravity as a vector to help push us deeper into the stretch. If you can perform this drill with a nice neutral back, getting chest down towards the bench and legs straight, I would say you're at a very good position in which you could go towards something like a seated pancake morning flat on the floor if you wanted to take your pancake development that much further. So finally, let's talk a little bit about reps and sets. I actually personally like this drill as a remedial exercise, as an accessory exercise towards our main training. So I'd be performing it for somewhere between 2 to 4 sets of 8 to 12, maybe even 15 repetitions. I prefer it in that higher rep range, going a little bit lighter with the weight and focusing on that range of motion. However, this is a fantastic exercise also for strengthening those spinal erectors if you want to lift heavy, that kind of bottom squat, that most flexed position at the hip. So we can actually train this one with a little bit of experience, more towards that 4 to 6 rep range, and load it up with anything from like 30 to 40% of your max 1 rep max squat and beyond. There are some extremely big numbers that are being posted by people like Westside Barbell. But that's basically it. That is my kind of take on this drill, and I think it's a fantastic drill, whether you're a beginner or even advanced. It's gonna be valuable for you if you wanna get strong and flexible. This drill appears in the Iron Strength program in my app Tribe, in which we focus on developing and getting up that 1 rep max when it comes to some weighted calisthenics movements, but also the squat and the deadlift as well. You can access that as well as all the other programs in my app Tribe for 1 monthly fee. I'll link that in the description down below. If you do have any questions about it, you know what to do. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. If you just enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button and support the channel. Right next to it is that subscribe button if you want to join the Bodyweight Warrior Tribe. Don't miss out on any more future videos. But other than that, I'll catch you in the next one. Have a strong week and peace.